The studio lights were unrelenting, pouring down in golden beams across the debate stage. A crowd had gathered, some in person, many more waiting behind screens, ready for yet another skirmish in the never-ending political theater of America. On one side stood Kellyanne Conway, seasoned strategist, counselor to former President Donald Trump, and master of the sharp-edged soundbite. Her reputation preceded her. She could spin almost any scenario into a win, dance around inconvenient truths, and deploy a weaponized version of facts that often left her opponents scrambling to catch up. On the other side was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a rising Democratic star from Texas. Known for her fiery passion, unflinching directness, and razor-sharp wit, she had built a reputation in Washington as someone who never backed down from a fight, especially when the fight involved truth, justice, or defending those who didn't have a platform of their own. The clash was inevitable. The moderators barely had time to finish their introductions before Kellyanne leaned forward, eyes flashing with the confidence of someone who had done this dance countless times before. Greater than Congresswoman Crockett, she began, the American people want facts, not feelings. Let me remind you of the record. From there, Kellyanne launched into a barrage of statistics, dates, and selective figures. She talked about economic shifts, crime rates, and snippets of legislation, a rapid-fire monologue designed not only to overwhelm but to corner. Her cadence was sharp, her tone clipped with the authority of someone who believed, at least in that moment, that she held the higher ground. The audience murmured in appreciation. Kellyanne, after all, had mastered the art of political theater. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She let Kellyanne finish, her eyes steady, her expression unreadable. And when it was finally her turn, she leaned into the microphone with a calm that immediately cut through the tension. Greater than Kellyanne, Jasmine began softly, you've built a career on bending facts into pretzels and serving them as truth. But the difference between you and me is this: I don't need to twist reality to make my point. Reality speaks for itself. The room stirred. Kellyanne's brows furrowed, just slightly. For the first time that evening, the veteran debater felt something unusual, the beginnings of unease. To understand what was unfolding, one had to understand Kellyanne Conway herself. For decades, she had been at the forefront of Republican strategy, carving out a space where charisma, cunning, and rhetorical agility became her trademark. She was a pollster before she became a household name, studying how Americans thought and voted with almost scientific obsession. But it wasn't until 2016, when she became Donald Trump's campaign manager, the first woman to ever manage and win a U.S. presidential campaign, that she cemented her place in the history books. Her style was unconventional, to put it mildly. Where others relied on straightforward messaging, Kellyanne thrived in the gray. She would counter one fact with another, spin a criticism into a compliment, or simply overwhelm her opponent with so many talking points that entangling them felt impossible. She famously coined the phrase, alternative facts, a term that would come to symbolize a deeper, troubling shift in American political discourse. To her supporters, she was brilliant, a woman unafraid to spar with hostile interviewers and win. To her critics, she was the embodiment of political manipulation, twisting truth beyond recognition. And that night, standing across from Jasmine Crockett, she was determined to prove she hadn't lost her touch. Jasmine Crockett, however, was no ordinary opponent. A freshman congresswoman from Texas, she had risen quickly through the Democratic ranks not because of calculated politicking but because of her authenticity. She had a lawyer's mind, trained to dissect arguments piece by piece, and a Texan's fire, unafraid to speak her mind even when it ruffled feathers. She had been underestimated before, a black woman from the South, unapologetically progressive, often dismissed by pundits as too brash, or too emotional. But time and again, she proved her critics wrong. On Capitol Hill, in committee hearings, and in press interviews, she developed a reputation for her quick comebacks and her refusal to let misinformation slide. So when Kellyanne Conway aimed her facts like darts, Jasmine didn't panic. She didn't fumble for notes or stumble over statistics. Instead, she understood something crucial. Kellyanne's weapon was not the facts themselves, but the performance of facts. And the best way to counter a performance is not to drown in it, but to expose it. The moment came quickly. Kellyanne finished a particularly sharp line about crime statistics, suggesting that democratic cities were failing their people while Republicans held the key to law and order. It was a familiar refrain, one Conway had polished for years. But Jasmine leaned forward, her voice steady, her tone firm. Greater than, let's pause right there, she said. Kellyanne, you love to rattle off numbers as if they exist in a vacuum. But here's the truth. Context matters. Crime doesn't rise or fall because one party suddenly gains moral superiority. It rises and falls based on investment in communities, access to education, healthcare, housing, things your party consistently votes against. A ripple of applause broke through the audience. Kellyanne's jaw tightened, but Jasmine wasn't done. Greater than, and let's be clear, Jasmine continued, her words gaining momentum. The people you're trying to scare with cherry-picked statistics, they're not just data points. They're human beings, they're families, and unlike your alternative facts, they don't disappear when the cameras turn off. The applause grew louder. Kellyanne opened her mouth to respond, but Jasmine, with impeccable timing, delivered the knockout line. Greater than, so if you came here to corner me with facts, Kellyanne, you're going to need real ones, not the ones you invent when reality doesn't cooperate. The crowd erupted, cameras flashed, and just like that, the stage belonged to Jasmine Crockett.